Actually,
I think I might just get started then now, as the numbers are slowly trickling over. Welcome everybody to this evening's In Conversation with Ron Finkel AM and Dr. Jamal Rifi AM. And I always think it's very important, as we always in these programs talk about issues of great concern for us as human beings sharing this planet, to make sure that we know of issues of true social justice here in our land. And therefore, I think it is very appropriate to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. And I, in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, am in the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation, while as Dr. Rifi is in Belmore, part of the city of Canterbury, which is the Gadigal people. And Ron is in Caulfield in Melbourne, which is the Wurundjeri people. And so we acknowledge that over time, European settlement intentionally and consequentially has displaced these and other indigenous peoples from their lands. While they never ceded their sovereignty, these events disempowered them and greatly destroyed their culture. So we acknowledge that to heal the wounds of the First Nations of this land, we must empower their voice within the Australian Constitution, learn the truth of our intertwined history, and reach treaties to share equitably the advantage of this land. And I am proud to say that this isn't just what we within Emanuel Synagogue think, but it's actually part of the policy of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, which is the roof body of all Jewish organizations in Australia. So with that acknowledgement, I would now like to welcome all of you to tonight's conversation, and I will introduce our guest. And just before I do that, I want to thank Marina Capone, our Director of Programming, for helping to organize this and other In Conversation, so many other programs of the synagogue, and Robert Klein, Head of Marketing and Communications, to help bring them to you. And our first presenter, I'll ask him a question, is going to be Ron, who grew up in Melbourne, part of what he describes as a Bialystok household. His father, a refugee who escaped out to Siberia as war broke out, and eventually down to Australia. His mother, fortunate to arrive in Australia before war broke out, but much of their family perished, and he was raised in a highly Zionistic household that led him to go to Israel, his first visit there at the end of '66. And obviously momentous events have happened between then and now. Ron graduated in law and commerce from the University of Melbourne, and while he has worked as a businessman, the managing director of Momentum Ventures, which is one of the first venture capital funds in Australia, he's actually renowned for his philanthropy and communal service, particularly in the Jewish community. He's been president for some years now of Hadassah Australia, through which in 2013, Project Rosanna was launched, which is an initiative, and we're going to be focusing on that and hearing more about that, to use Israeli excellence in healthcare to benefit the Palestinian community. And people have come to realize over these years that healthcare is really the only area of civil society where Israelis and Palestinians truly meet on such a broad scale and on equal terms of mutual respect. Project Rosanna is quite an extraordinary organization in that since it was founded in 2013, Australia, Israel, Palestine, it has also become international with support from Canada, the United Kingdom, and the USA as well. Now, Dr. Jamal Rifi comes from slightly further afield, he grew up in Tripoli in Lebanon, and in challenging times and challenging circumstances, in the sense that if we aren't old enough to remember, we've heard about the civil war of Lebanon and what impact that had. And so in 1980s, he went to Romania to study medicine. And I'm going to have him go into the reasons why he realized that was not the place for him to further his studies after about 4 years there. Returned back to his family in Lebanon and looking for a place to further his studies. And, love was in the air. And he had a woman that he wanted to come and marry, that he'd known for all his life, who's living in Australia. So we have had the good fortune that to Australia he came, and this is where he redid his medical studies, graduating from the University of Sydney in 1990, and a couple of years later qualifying as a GP, and for these 3 decades, a leading GP in a practice in Belmore. And along the line, he was a finalist as an Australian local hero for Australian of the Year. He was working in the Community Relations Council and doing lots of communal work. In 2015, the Australian chose him as Australian of the Year, and the Australian newspaper, that is, and he received his honorary doctorate from the University of Canberra that time as well. In 2017, he was made a member of the Order of Australia in recognition of his outstanding achievement in service, and Ron was also awarded as a member for his similar outstanding achievement in service the following year in 2018. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome tonight Ron Finkel, AM, and Dr. Jamal Rifi, AM, to our conversation. And so we see 2 men who have come from very, very different backgrounds, who met a few years ago and have been working deeply on more projects in Project Rosanna. But I want to first ask Ron, because tonight's program really is talking about how we build bridges and see the humanity in the other. Coming from such a Zionist background, we know, the panoply and the breadth of what that can mean. How did you end up becoming someone after those journeys to Israel who realized that you wanted to help build bridges between the different peoples there, that it wasn't us versus them, but it was all of us together? What was the path that took you?
So Jeffrey, thanks for that. Good evening, everybody. And I think I'll try and focus on the elevator pitch, because otherwise it'll take a little bit of time. But it's very, very interesting that what happened to me in late December 1966. And I wrote to my mother shortly after arrival in Israel as a 17-and-a-half-year-old. And I wrote to her that I had a feeling about being in Israel in a way that I hadn't had a feeling like this, of being truly complete and at home, that I'd had in all my charmed and lucky life here in Australia. And I think growing up in a home that really stressed the idea of Jewish people and the sense of being in Israel was the completion of it. But it was very important to me. I was at campus in 67, 68. There were lots of progressive youth issues that were happening at the time, student issues. The student revolutions of 1968 were pretty impactful. But I always felt strongly that if I bought into the idea of that the Jewish people has a right to self-determination, then ipso facto, it was essential to recognize that others also had their right to self-determination and national expression. So I will say, hand on my heart, from 1968 onwards, I have been a deep believer in the rights of Palestinians to national self-determination. And I guess that was a journey that I began and followed through when I became the president of the World Union of Jewish Students in the period 1973 to 1977. And little anecdote, because it was actually a really relevant one just now. Last week, in the context of Project Rosanna, I had my first conversation with a Palestinian representative based in the UK since 1976. And it was, I spoke at some length following an introduction from the Palestinian representative here in Australia, Izzat Abdul Hadi, who's a very good friend and been a very strong supporter of Project Rosanna, to and the Palestinian representative in the UK, Hussam Zomlot. And for me, it was like a reconnection, because back in the mid 70s, I had, as president of the World Union of Jewish Students, been in a sanctioned dialogue, sanctioned by the Israeli Foreign Ministry and the World Jewish Congress, with the then Palestinian representative in the UK, a guy by the name of Saeed Hamami, who unfortunately I think for the Palestinians was assassinated in early 1978. But this journey that I went on was reflected in my own personal experience in the next phase of my life, which was 9 years living in Israel, in Jerusalem, at a time when Israelis and Palestinians pretty much interacted in every single possible way you can think of. Commerce and education interactions, cultural interactions, obviously health interactions. So we would meet on the beaches, we would go to their markets and so on and so forth. So I felt very strongly at that time that we knew each other. And that was a very important thing. You will even find today in Gaza, older people who still speak Hebrew because they worked in Israel for extended periods of time. So my journey has always been around this idea of of two peoples living side by side, respectfully, and the opportunity arose for me, I think, in 2013 to begin to make a contribution to engaging and trying to build this bridge. And the bridge is not just between people, it's actually to bridge a chasm of mutual knowledge that are basically, since the second Intifada, young people on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side simply weren't getting to know each other. And, you know, fast forward, the kind of issues that were happening and the narratives were getting more and more extreme. I felt it was imperative, really imperative, to have a bottoms-up approach, that the capacity of most of us in the diaspora to make any contribution to macro political outcomes is negligible, but our capacity to make a significant contribution at the people-to-people level is really significant. So we founded Project Rosanna in 2013, and fast forward to 2020, we are really doing some excellent work. And part of what we did when we started Project Rosanna was to say, this is not a Jewish or Zionist project. This is an Australian program which involves Australians from all backgrounds getting to know each other, taking us out of our respective bubbles, ensuring that we get to engage with each other and do something constructively together, and do it for the benefit of building bridges to better understanding between Israelis and Palestinians through health. So that's...
Yeah.
But
so
it was a very tall building, by the way.
No, that's good.
The elevator went for a while.
No, it needed to be a tall building, because it's so important to get that journey and get that understanding. And it's, for you, it's something that goes back, you know, as you say, like, you know, as you were starting uni years. So I imagine, I didn't check your birthday, but you were probably still
49.
a late teen. Yeah.
49.
Yeah, so yeah, you were just still a teenager when you went to Israel that first time. And now, meanwhile, a young teen, you know, Jamal, was in Lebanon, in Tripoli. You know, it's the time, as I said, of the Lebanese Civil War. And I can only imagine, Jamal, at that time, what you might have thought both of Israelis and Jews. There was enough tension going on inside of Lebanon, but with the neighbor, the south. So your journey is even, in a sense, a far longer one. And if you don't mind talking about how, from knowing Jews and Israelis only as the enemy, the other, and as well, of course, we spoke a little bit earlier, what that experience in Romania was that, also, shifted you towards moving forward in life, if you don't mind.
Jeffrey, good evening, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Jeffrey. Unfortunately, we can't be next to each other, even though that at the time when we agreed to have this discussion, it was to be in the at your place. Yeah. Unfortunately, through the pandemic, we just couldn't be there physically, and that's why we are doing through the Zoom. So to everyone who is watching and listening, thank you for doing that. Unfortunately, we can't be together, but hopefully and definitely we will be one day, at least if we survive this pandemic, and hopefully we all survive. And unfortunately, many people are dying and dying needlessly. Nevertheless, the pandemic is causing a lot of fracture line amongst societies, communities, and worldwide. And hopefully we will survive it all together, and we will be better. And we can only survive it when we work together. To go back to the question, yes, I was born and educated in Tripoli, Lebanon. I was active at school, and I was the captain of my school. Unfortunately, at that time, the Syrian army was in Tripoli, and I could see how they were causing us a lot of grief in Tripoli. They were taking control of civil society at that time, and they causing a lot of disruption to our structural way of life in Tripoli itself. And the Syrian weren't seeing the enemies before, but through the action, to be honest, I viewed the Syrian army at that time was a Syrian occupation force. And there was a lot of conflict. Then we had the civil war, and unfortunately it was between the Muslims and the Christians. And to be honest, I live in Tripoli, where we had and still have 2 large Palestinian camps. I get to meet them, but at the same time on the other side, we had very large villages. They are all Christians, and I also used to meet them. I used to play soccer, and I used to play among all these villages, and I built friendship. When this civil war happened, it fractured that friendship. And I see people in the leadership that they're causing a lot of disharmony to harmonious communities, and there was a lot of propaganda. Nevertheless, in 1979, I finished my studies, and I was on my way to go to France to study medicine. And due to the civil war, I couldn't get my visas on time, and I ended up in Romania, a country I never knew anything about it. And the minute I reached the airport, they wouldn't let me in till I paid a tuition fee for a whole year in American dollars. So I had to actually unzip my boots, take my socks, take also the American dollars that I had actually in my socks and give it to this guy. And it was very smelly, but he was very happy to accept it. And I ended up studying Romanian and went for medical school for 3 years after 1 year of Romanian. It took me that long to just realize that's not the type of medicine that I wanted to do. Because during Nicolae Ceausescu year, a human being and sick human being was seen as a burden to economy because it wasn't a productive person. And I ended up going back to Lebanon. During those years, yes, I fell in love and I wanted to get married. And I was lucky enough to come to Australia and to be given, I had to go to Syria at that time to apply for my visa. And to be honest, I could see the difference in the way the Syrian people in Syria were living and the way the Lebanese in Tripoli they were living. And I got my visas. And came to Australia. I had to study English, went to Sydney University and graduated in 1990. And then I worked, and in my work, I met all kinds of people. And I can say it's actually, I learned from my patients, and I learned a lot, and definitely it changed a lot of my views. I joined the Ethnic Affairs Commission as a commissioner, and then we changed the name to the Community Relations Commissioner. And I met with Stepan Kirkasharian and a few other commissioners. And of course, there was at that time a young Jewish lawyer who unfortunately fell ill after a couple of years and passed away, and God bless his soul. And we worked together, and after September 11, we worked together with community leaders, religious leaders, and to form what we call Unity in Adversity. And it was signed by Rabbi, Mufti, religious leaders, and priests and bishops. And I started to see the other. Yes, when I was in Tripoli, I must confess, I saw actually Israelis as the enemies. I get to meet a lot of Jewish community people in here, and I realized they're not so different to us. And there was a gradual change of vision. And definitely I felt if you need to build peace in the Middle East, people needs to talk. And of course, the Oslo Accord was at that time also an eye-opener. And ultimately, the Palestinians made their own decision, and they spoken with the Israelis, and they formed an opinion about forming a two-state solution. And I totally believed in it. And if that was the Palestinian wants, then let's have it this way. And throughout the years, I felt it's actually we need to contribute. And I did a lot of good work with the Palestinian community. But it came to the crunch with me and Project Rosanna. I heard about it on a day when a friend of mine, Dr. Sam Perla, invited me to have a dinner gathering at a lady's name, Nora. So I went to Nora's house, and I met two great ladies, Professor Esti Galili and Professor Mary Bashir. Professor Galili spoke about the binational school of psychotherapy. And the name binational, it struck me because it was based at Hadassah Hospital. And it says about the two nations, the Israeli nation and the Palestinians nation. And her speech was heartwarming. And after that, Professor Mary Bashir spoke about the encounter at Hadassah Hospital on the ward between an Orthodox family and an hijabi wearing grandmother. And they're both looking after their kids and their grandkids. And by the end of the night, and I said to myself, and I came and I told my wife, Lana, if this cause is good enough for those two great ladies, it's good enough for me. And I was lucky enough to speak with Ron a couple of days later. And when I hung up the phone and I again told my wife, gee, I think I was speaking to myself. Mm. And throughout the years, that in 2017, I joined Ron, and also we went and visited the Hadassah Hospital and many hospitals in West Bank, in Nablus and in Jerusalem. And I never looked back. It's cemented the values, the ideal about a human being need to work together. And if we can assist those in need, and I always assisted those in need, but on a smaller scale. But through Project Rosanna, we're doing it much bigger. And definitely, it is actually fits hands in glove in everything that I believe in for the last, let's say, 40 years of my life.
Thank you so much. And I hope these opening comments are inspirational for people. I want to now focus a little bit on the work of Project Rosanna. And since, Ron, it began with you, perhaps you would want, before we come into the COVID issue itself, to talk a little bit generally about how it's unfolded and moved from helping bring people from point A in Gaza or the territories into Israeli hospitals to far many more projects, and including sponsorships for studies, this binational school that Jamal just mentioned, and other contemporary projects as well. And then we'll focus on the COVID.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Just before we do that, I just want to say yes, Jamal and I had a great initial conversation, but we then, with the help of Sam Perla, we actually had dinner. Was it in Belmore or Lakember? I can't remember exactly, Jamal, but it was at a Lebanese restaurant that we went to, and I said to my wife at that occasion that I think it was love at first bite. Basically, now really, I as Jamal said, we come from totally different backgrounds, but what we felt that we could do together was really the joint motivation that by engaging with each other and through each other, with our communities and the broader community, we as Australians could make a difference. And our journey has really been a very precious one for me. And what Rosanna does, and I think it really is a metaphor. First of all, little Rosanna was an actual patient at Hadassah. She, for those who are listening and don't know the story, it's a really, I'll just say it in 2 seconds. She actually fell from a 9-story building near Ramallah and went splat onto concrete. Her mother, who had dual residency in Jerusalem and Ramallah, got the Red Crescent and the Magen David Adom to take this child who had virtually no life left in her. There was barely a pulse left in her, to the emergency at Hadassah. And Jamal and I met the doctor who received her at that moment, and he said, we did everything, we went through all the procedures, but we knew that this child was not going to make it. I mean, she was hemorrhaging and she had all these but you wouldn't believe it. And they went through the procedures. 24 hours later, her pulse was a little bit stronger. And I happened to see this video, and it's on the website, you can see it, of her mother speaking, her mother Mesa speaking to the camera about her experience. And she says to the camera, she says, look, I'm going to say something. I'm a Palestinian woman. I'm going to say something that's not necessarily politically correct, but here in Hadassah, they gave my daughter back the miracle of life, and I'll do whatever I can. And then it cuts to, and you see this little Rosanna, who's 4.5 years old, running around this is 9 months later. It was just really inspirational. I said, that's my metaphor for how health can be this bridge between people, and we can, through health, breathe real life into relationships between Israelis and Palestinians. And from that onwards, over 7 years, we've built something that has to address both the existential needs of Palestinians, and we do that in 2 very specific ways. For example, now, here and now, when we're addressing COVID-19, they have a real problem. I mean, it's not just they have an infrastructure that's stressed to the limit, and they're now facing, I think they have like 9,000 active cases, and most of them are in the Hebron area. And we can make a difference here and now. That's what we're doing. That's our current campaign. We also, even during the COVID period, and I'm very proud of this, we have one of our program umbrellas is called Wheels of Hope. And we have Israeli and Palestinian volunteers who every day, even through this period, are taking Palestinian children from their homes in the West Bank to hospitals in Israel. But that's not good enough. That is the handout in a way. It's not the hand up. It's not empowering. It's facilitating what's needed now. Project Rosanna is dedicated to the idea of empowering Palestinians and transferring skills and doing it through a train local, stay local framework, giving the Palestinians their capacity to treat Palestinians to the same high level of that they would expect if they went to an Israeli hospital. And through doing that, building human relationships between the two sides that stand the test of time. And we know that health professionals are the most widely respected group in the community, and they take the lead, they make a statement, it has real significant flow-on impact. So we run a number of programs that are training programs. Jamal mentioned the Binational School of Psychotherapy. We got a pilot grant of 420,000 Australian dollars from World Vision back in 2016. We ran it for 2.5 years. We then got, last October, we got a $1.2 million Australian grant from the EU Peace Initiative to expand that pilot from 16 Palestinian and Israeli child psychologists to 64 Palestinian and Israeli child psychologists, an accredited program. And that's just one example of the many things that we're doing. So by and large, it's gained momentum, and we're now active in the UK, Canada, the United States, Israel, and Australia. And it's a blessing because in each place, in every single jurisdiction, we are a board of people that reflects the breadth of personalities and demographies and ethnicities. And it's really been that joy of getting to know each other that is a strong motivator for all of us.
And what has been, and either of you can, over the last few years, the greatest challenges, roadblocks, stumbling blocks that have been thrown in front of you to make the work more difficult?
My goodness, Jeffrey, I don't think this is going to sound corny, but the only impediment to making the work happen has been human resource and capital. We've had buy-in. And Jamal, there has been a couple of incidents, and Jamal can talk personally from it, but by and large, we've had extraordinary buy-in from both the Israeli side and the Palestinian side by people on the ground. Here in some parts of the diaspora, there are ideological groups that haven't been able to digest what Project Rosanna is all about. I defer to Jamal because he's really been on the front line of some of that stuff. But we haven't had, actually, to tell you the truth, Jeff, we really haven't had any major hiccups other than the ones that Jamal has encountered.
And I wasn't sure if there had been any issues either, from governmental authorities over there or the Jewish community. So that's great. But unfortunately, yes, when I was at the dinner, when I heard both you and Jamal speak in May of 2019 here in Sydney, I was aware the next day or so that threats, Jamal, had been made against you for your participation. We spoke earlier, and I think it'd be great if you, because it relates to that, being able to stand up for the other, if you would want to share a little bit of the trauma through which you went and how you're responding to it.
Okay. Jeffrey, I reckon there was a lot of hiccups, but we knew there would be those hiccups. And we knew that there will be a lot of obstacles for us to overcome, because we are, to be honest, going through uncharted territory of challenging each and every person about their perceived ideas about the other. There are those who could see the value and the humanity of what we are doing. There are those who only can see their own ideology and philosophy in life and how stringent they are, and they're not going to be changing. I knew we're going to get in trouble. I mean, we're not going to get in trouble, but I knew that's actually some other people, they're going to be in trouble, to be honest. because we are challenging their own propaganda. But I knew there will be some issues. And I can take it myself, but at the same time, there are those around me, my immediate family, and I don't want them to suffer any repercussion from anything that I do. And that is, I always try to be inclusive and get their points of view into what we are doing. And of course, before even joining Project Rosanna, I sat down with my kids, with my wife. I spoken with my brother, I spoken with my mother, God bless her soul. And I've told them about what I'm doing and what I'm planning to join Project Rosanna. And I've told them that the repercussion is going to happen from my side of the community about what I'm doing. And to be honest, there was huge support from my immediate family. And the consensus was, if you believe it's a good thing and it will benefit humanities at large and people who are in need, we're not going to let those narrow-minded people stop you from achieving this just because you are worrying about how it's going to impact on us. And we did. I went to Palestine and I visited the hospital in 2017, and I put it in Arabic newspapers. And I went on the Voice of Islam radio station, and I talked about my impression, about my feeling. And I encouraged people to go and visit the Palestinian territory and pray at the Aqsa Mosque and everything. So I didn't hide away from what I'm doing at all. But then in 2019, when we decided to do hand-in-hand dinner, and we planned it, and then a couple of days before that, I got a call from a journalist from Lebanon that worked for Al-Akhbar newspaper. And actually, I'll rephrase it. I got a call from my brother that a journalist from Al-Akhbar newspaper wants to talk to me. And if I want to talk to her, and I said, I don't mind talking to anyone. And he gave me her phone number and I called her. And I've told her about what I'm doing. And I said, I'm not hiding. He said, actually, you are dealing with the Zionists, with the enemies. These are against. And I said, like, look, you can frame it every and each way you want, ideologically. But I'm not going to let people dictate to me how I'm going to lead my life and how I'm going to have my own visions. And I'm not going to be afraid no matter what you're going to do, because everything you're talking to me does not make sense because you're going through a propaganda and that sort of things. And she's the same journalist spoken with the Palestinian ambassador, Dr. Izzat Abdul Hadi. And so she put an article in a newspaper, Al-Akhbar, the news in Lebanon, and she twisted all the fact that I and he spoke about, and they actually made a big propaganda out big issues. And we still went, we did the dinner, and furthermore, we made sure on the night of the dinner that we had the whole dinner being broadcast live to the Lebanese audience. And that's where the Lebanese broadcasting authorities and TV, they took all these footage from the dinner, they packaged something against me by picking on different points, and they sent a report to the military court in Lebanon that I broke the 1954 Lebanese Act that prevented anyone from going to the Palestinian territory and all that sort of things. Now, I knew about it, but I had nothing to fear from them, nothing to be afraid of, and nothing except to be true to myself, true to my friendship with Ron, and true to the people who attended that dinner. Nevertheless, it prevented me and still preventing me from going to Lebanon, but it doesn't surprise me. For a justice system that wanted to only recently prevent the American ambassador in Lebanon from talking to the media, it's the same justice system that's going to take me to the court. Because Lebanon right now, unfortunately, it's not that the Lebanon that I knew. Lebanon is controlled by certain ideological people, and they see what I'm doing as threat to their way of life, way of thinking, way of propaganda. We knew this is going to happen, and to be honest, we are going and stream full steam. We're not going to stop. Unfortunately, some narrow-minded people at the local level, they were influenced by all the propaganda from arisen from Lebanon, and they were calling for my death and that sort of things. And some people in here, they just rode the wave. They could not see the value of what we are doing, and they also made the same propaganda on Facebook and that sort of things. And I made a report to the police and made some statement. The police, the Department of Public Prosecutor, they're still studying my application, and they are due to pass a judgment what they're gonna take it further or not. And both ways, I'm happy. If they accept to take it further, that will be perfect, because those people who wanted to take the high moral ground from behind the screens and through their Facebook propaganda to accuse other people to being the enemy of their own nation and to call them name and that sort of things, they should suffer the consequences. So if the DPP will take it further, will be great. And if the DPP doesn't take it further, then I have a challenge to engage with the New South Wales government to say the laws, the way it is, that protect people like me from standing their own ground, then that law is not worth the paper that written on it, and they need to look into to protect people who wanted to cross those red lines, people who wanted to make others probably see the light, and they're going to be attacked on Facebook and social media. So both ways, I would say it's a win-win no matter what the outcome.
You know, if we were at Emanuel Synagogue, as we planned when we talked about this in February, I guarantee you would be hearing huge applause for your courage, for your bravery, for your staying so true to your principles of humanitarianism and engaging with the other. And I on behalf of all, I thank you for that courage, and I ask of all to you know, be there to support Dr. Rifi in whatever way we can, and as things unfold on that specific issue. But let's come back to the, you know, you have not been deterred, and you and Ron have developed this beautiful friendship over the last 3+ years. And, you know, here it is, the craziest year for humanity in many a decade, and Project Rosanna was going along wonderfully with you know, projects and coming up with new ideas you know, every few years to continue the bridging of the gap through healthcare. And now comes COVID, which, as we all know, knows no boundaries. So how have the two of you seen the impact of COVID on your work, and how have you been able to ramp up Project Rosanna's response to that in a way? And what are your concerns now, given unfortunately after the, you know, it seemed like things were relatively okay, like here, it's really gotten out of control there. So just, you know, that sense of how it started off so well, and what are the challenges now with COVID?
So if I may just say a quick few words. going back to the beginning of March this year, we had a mission in Israel and Palestine, and it was fantastic. It was really good. I managed to get back here mid-March, just as lockdown was starting. And I really felt very flat, because we'd had this inspirational visit, everything was going great, and all the programs basically had to be suspended. But you know, it's very, very interesting, and we've seen it in business and other places. You can pivot, and somehow things that you didn't even think about become opportunities. And I knew that there was a situation that was emerging on the ground. The Palestinian Health Network was very, very stretched. And I was in a very lucky situation. My brother happened to be the chair of the National Ventilator Task Force. And so I knew that here in Australia, we were gearing up to address the issue of producing enough ventilators to meet the anticipated need. As it happened in Australia, at that time, we crushed the curve. We've now got all the ventilators that we need and over and above. But the World Health Organization, who we're quite close to and working with in Jerusalem, had written to us and said, look, you know, there is a big problem. And then the door opened. How did it open? One night I get a call, and the gentleman says, Ron Finkel. I said, yes. This is quite late at night. He says, this is Dr. Riyad al-Maliki. And I said, yes. He says, I'm the Palestinian foreign minister. Oh. He said, I'm led to believe you might be able to help us. We have been trying to source ventilators. We can't get ventilators. Our needs pale into insignificance compared to those in Italy and the UK and France. The world all of a sudden went ballistic in terms of needing ventilators. Can you help? I said, yes. I had no idea what we were going to do, but I said, yes, we'll help. And by really a combination of bits of good fortune and the very proactive support of the Australian government, at a time when they knew that the demand for ventilators was going down, they encouraged us and provided us the support that we needed to go out there and to procure the ventilators from the Australian company ResMed, which was able to provide us right up front. We were pushed to the head of the queue. We stood in the shoes of the Australian government's order. They enabled us to get the needed ventilators. And all of a sudden, a relationship has begun to develop with the Palestinian Authority in a way that we didn't have that relationship beforehand. And if I look now going forward, we have supplied, through the generosity of the community, the strong support of Jamal and others, we have provided close to $350,000 US, like $500,000 Australian, in vitally needed equipment to the Palestinian Authority. Those ventilators and other equipment are being used now in dedicated COVID-19 facilities in the Palestinian territories. And over and above that, we are supporting the transfer of knowledge from the Israeli hospitals to the Palestinian health network to ensure that they are as much up to speed as possible on the latest modalities of treatment for patients who are coming into the ICUs. So this has opened, it almost fast forwarded us in a way that I would, back in March, I would never have ever thought. And we have a relationship, I think, that is emerging both with the public sector, which is the Palestinian Authority Health Network, and our traditional relationships, which were with the non-government hospital sector. And together, it's enabling us to do some fantastic things. And going forward, I really believe that a very profoundly positive platform has been established for us. And it's taking Project Rosanna, and Jamal is aware of this, on a path where I believe sustainably our future will be built around funding from government sources. We'd be one of the few organizations that emerged from within the Jewish community, is now it's clearly not a Jewish organization, it's an Australian organization. And we are, over the next months, going to go down an accreditation pathway. That's also true in Canada, and it's also true in Europe. And you may have read that the American Congress, about 2 weeks ago, just the House of Representatives passed legislation to support a $250 million funding grant to what they call, it's called the building bridges kind of thing between Israelis and Palestinians, and people-to-people work is at least 50% of what that funding will. And I think we're very well positioned to get support from that as well for our various programs. So it was a big concern in the middle of March, but in the middle of July or the beginning of August, I can say really with a lot of hard work, and Jamal and I've put in a tremendous amount of work, but it's also not just him and me, it's our units around the world that have been putting in the time and the effort as well. So Jamal, I mean, over to you, because you have a slightly different perspective potentially than I do.
Okay. Jeffrey, at the time when the Palestinian Authority was given the chance to procure ventilators, each to the cost of 44,000 American dollars. And even if they paid that money, they would need to wait 3 months for that supply to arrive. Ron worked day and night from late March, April, till mid-May. We secured 20 ICU invasive ventilators from ResMed, and we shipped them to the Palestinian Authority, and they received them in Ramallah on the 28th of May. The dates are very important because at that time, there was no one would be able to secure any ventilator anywhere in the world, because for us to purchase them, we needed an approval from the Australian government because they are items of national significance. And we needed a permission to ship them from the Australian government. And through that process and through the hard work, day in and day out, with the Prime Minister's office, with the Health Minister's office, and with the Foreign Minister office, we managed to obtain very early a replacement of the ventilators that we have purchased, that they are being produced right now to replenish the 20 that we took from the Australian government stock. So even the one that we bought, we would be produced now by ResMed, and we need to send them, let's say, now. But we gain no less than 2.5 months by borrowing that 20 ventilators and send them back. So it wasn't just the ventilator, it was the timing of sending those ventilators. And we're still working on to sending more, because we've sent 34 ventilators so far. And 4 of those ventilators, they're gonna go to different hospitals. And one of them we are hoping that's actually even to go to the Makassid hospitals in Jerusalem. Because wherever there is a need, we will supply. And we supply to hospitals that they're run by the health department in the Palestinian Authority, but also non-government hospitals, because we all know they provide a lot of help to many people over there. And as Ron have said, it's not just the equipment, but also the knowledge. So we are working with Israeli doctors, and we are working actually with the Palestinian doctors to exchange that information, because there is a lot of new information. And to go back and probably, and there will be, a chance for Australian doctors to even put their hands up, and through Zooms like that, we could organize for them to meet with Palestinian doctors so they can tell them about the latest method and latest information about how to treat patients with the COVID-19 virus. And we need even more money because, to be honest, the 500,000 that we got through our supporters. Everyone was paying little money, and we actually buying equipment for very cheap. And the reason why we are buying it very cheap, because they are charging us much less than what they're charging the Australian government itself. They gave us even 7%. Was it 7% less, Ron? And because ResMed sees of what we are doing, they're not seeing as a commercial. They're seeing as a humanitarian. It is their role. And look, the pieces came together. And as well as I say, all the stars aligned. His hard work, the need over there, good people in the Scott Morrison's office, good people in Marie Spain's office, good people in Greg Hunt's office, and good people in ResMed. But most importantly, good people who are listening to us tonight, good people who are supporting us, because we can do the hard work, but if we don't have the money to purchase, we can't purchase. And people actually putting where their mouth is. And I know we could not have gathered this amount of money where we are competing with major events and we are competing with major news items, because to collect money is not going to be something very important when the Premier of New South Wales, of Victoria, has declared state of emergencies tonight. So we didn't have any news media taken our course to promote what we are doing. But we had more important, we had Rabbi Jeffrey Kamins, we had actually our friends, we had everything, caught us on Zoom, plus 61 media and everything. So we did have some, but not that much. If it wasn't, if we had more publicity, probably we'll get more people to donate. So hopefully our action now in the UK and with a few things that we are doing in Canada and USA, we will keep getting some fund so we can send some more material, because to be honest, if we don't, there will be a lot of fracture line even among the Palestinian communities themselves, because this COVID is affecting a human being in very different ways, not just the respiratory system. It's the heart, it's the brain, it's the kidney. But at the same time, it's affecting society in very different ways. We see fracture line happening within their own state. We see now people denying the existence of the virus. We see people saying it's a government conspiracy theories and that sort of thing. So it's affecting even people's mind, unfortunately, even the wise ethic.
Thank you so much for that. I want to make a quick announcement. First of all, people, it would be lovely if you want to ask some questions. Jamal just referred to the situation in Melbourne. I noticed it's the 6 o'clock hour, and so not that Ron was going anywhere, but yes, the curfew has just begun there now at this hour, and our hearts go out to everybody in Victoria and in Melbourne in particular and surrounds, and at the same time reminds us how extra careful we have to be. We're just, as they say, on the knife edge, and this is nothing compared to what's going on in the Palestinian territories in Israel. And so I want to get back to the situation on the ground in a second. We'll ask, and so as questions come in, as I said, it's an opportunity. I'm not sure, I hope, that the doubling is still on, Ron, on the campaign.
So let me just, I just noticed, Jeffrey, well, I hope you don't mind, I've noticed a couple of questions which I can give two quick answers. One person asked about the situation and getting equipment to Gaza. Just Gaza's situation is really, really interesting. We all know that Gaza is basically hermetically closed. So it's, but that is actually reflected in the fact that the number of cases in Gaza is negligible. There are in total, I think, 72 recorded cases since the 1st of March in Gaza and 1 death, and it hasn't grown at all. So we are very concerned about Gaza. We work closely with the WHO. The situation on the West Bank, particularly in the area of Hebron, has been catastrophic. So, and interestingly, it just shows you, one second, get rid of that. Sorry. It just shows you what we talk about the ecosystem. Israel and Palestine are connected. There is this virus does not know any boundaries. So we had a surge in Israel, like night follows day, you have a surge in the West Bank. And if we don't solve it in the West Bank, it'll surge again in Israel. This is an ecosystem that we have to work together on. And so what happened is you have in the southern Hebron hills, a lot of Bedouin villages. You have a lot of Bedouin villages in the southern part of Israel. Israeli Bedouins are moving backwards and forwards all the time. Palestinian workers are coming into Israel and going back. This is the nature of it. So we have to work together. This is the absolutely prime example of how health works together. So at the moment, Gaza is pretty much a closed, obviously it's closed environment, so it hasn't had an outbreak. Let us hope it continues like that, because if it doesn't, it'll be catastrophic.
Can I ask you for a second? Is the program of Roads to Recovery bringing patients out of Gaza for dialysis and things happening now? Or
it is with great challenges. It's nothing to do with us. It's really got to do with the authorities and stuff. It's a separate discussion. There are a lot of concerns, and there's nothing that too much at the moment we as projects can do. But those that do come through, we take care of. But the activity on the West Bank has been continuous. So that was just with regard to the question about Gaza. The other question that I noticed here was about publicity inside the West Bank. Now, one of the most amazing things, really truly amazing, was that when we delivered on the 28th of May those ventilators to the Palestinian Authority Foreign Ministry, they broadcast it live on Palestine TV. I had acquaintances of mine from the West Bank who rang up to say they were literally in tears to hear the Palestinian Foreign Minister embracing the mission of Project Rosanna, recognizing that this was a program of people of all faiths and backgrounds working together. It was really quite remarkable. So I think that the profile of Project Rosanna has been enhanced by all of this, and they weren't doing it under the cover, under the radar. They went right up, and in fact, I have a friend who's on our board in Israel, Dr. Dan Shonit, who was with the Paris Center for Peace. He ran their health program. He said in all his years of when they have received grants and donations, I mean, we had these incidents about the plane loads of PPE coming in from the Gulf and all. There have been Qatar gives, and virtually he couldn't recall a situation where they actually publicly acknowledged the receipt of donation from a third party. He said it was quite unusual, and I think it speaks volumes about the potential that we have to engage. So the programs we have in the pipeline, I won't go into them in too great detail, but we have a program that we're going to be doing in women's health in the West Bank, irrespective of COVID. Women's health, women really have terribly they have enormous challenges getting access to basic health services. And there is an initiative, we're just finishing the feasibility study to bring health services to the remote villages in the West Bank. And over the next 3 to 5 years, that will be a really major program of ours going forward, again, with the Israeli-Palestinian cooperation. So yeah, our profile has definitely been enhanced as a result of what's been going on.
And so I was going to, try to raise some money for you for a sec. So let me just ask: there was that doubling program? Is that still on, or is that over?
It's basically there's a smidgen left. So if everybody hurries,
yeah.
No, I'm not kidding.
I loved your idea. We tried to get it out through the Union of Progressive Judaism or Pluralist Judaism that has 10,000 people in the, Australia, New Zealand, and Asian region. And you said if each person could give, even $18, and obviously some would give more. You think what would have happened? It didn't happen that way, but we do have 100+ people listening, and you can just go on Project Rosanna, and eventually the doubling will stop. But
but that's not important. Important is that the money is deployed in a very practical way, and what we might do, Jeffrey, is that those who are on the program. We'll share the link with them through your office, and what we can do is ask people to share it with others and push forward. The need has not gone down. The need is as great as it was, and our role is making a difference. So, very much appreciated. Your advocacy is appreciated. Thank you to everybody on the program.
Thank you. And what is the mood like on the ground there? I mean, we hear, well, we know what we feel like up here in Sydney, just knowing there's a few dozen cases and it's shakier and things like that. You're down in Victoria, and you're into a stage 4 lockdown for 6 weeks now, and this pales compared to what's going on in places like Hebron and other parts of Palestine and in Israel as well. When you're talking to your colleagues there, what's both within the medical profession and they're referring to the population as well, what's the mood there? How are people coping?
Look, I don't have my finger entirely on the pulse. All I can tell you, I have a son who lives in Tel Aviv, and they seem to be in a situation where they're having 2,000 cases a day, and they still, life is going on in a very unstructured way. It really is a puzzle to me. On the Palestinian side, on the other hand, they are really very diligent. They've actually accepted the responsibility of lockdown and stuff like that, and they're focused. They really are focused, and so hopefully, look, Jeffrey, it's very hard from here to get a strong feeling, but I can say that those that are in touch with us, and there are quite a few of them, evidencing discipline. Why have they got this chaos? The chaos is exactly the same on the Israel side and the Palestinian side. When there was a wedding, they have hundreds. When there's a funeral, they have thousands. And these are very, very strong family, tribal communities. So when something happens, they all gather. They thought things were good, all of a sudden, kaboom. This vicious virus has attacked them without any advance warning, and basically, and it's gone from, if you look at the statistics, and I just will say this, and I don't want to labor it too much. If you look at the Palestinian statistics put out by the WHO from the 1st of March to the 15th of June, for the total period, 492 cases and a small number of fatalities. I mean, really, we were talking like 3 or 4 or 5 deaths. It was amazing. The 15th of June, this is after they'd had the Israeli opened up, workers came backwards and forwards, families crossed the border. From the 15th to now, they've had nearly 14,000 cases, and they have a remaining 9,000 to 10,000 active cases. It just went, you look at the curve, and it's exponential, and just shows you how vicious it is. And of course, deaths have gone up in an equivalent way. So they will not resolve the problem until both sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians, together develop a policy of social distancing, wearing masks, and doing all the right things that need to be done. The economic situation is very different, and for many it's really dire, and that's another, but we can't deal, I mean, it's not for us to, we have no capacity to deal with that. We live in a blessed country. Australians do not necessarily appreciate how amazing government policy has been over the last 6 months to provide a really a security blanket for the population. It's worked here, but it's not working necessarily in Palestine and Israel in the same way.
Thank you. And Jamal, have you been talking to colleagues there in Palestine? And, you know, because on the front line, and we hear how many, you know, doing the care are also, you know, suffering then from the disease. How's the mood on the ground from conversations you may have had?
I have been receiving a lot of feedbacks from people, Palestinian who lives in Australia, but at the same time I have been speaking with some people in the West Bank from time to time, trying to see where our equipment, which hospital has gone, how it is used, and the numbers of the cases. Definitely there is very big strain on the hospital systems to deal with the numbers of COVID patients. The good thing is their civil societies, NGOs, they're doing a lot of good work. But at the same time, the Palestinian Authority, when they wanted to reinforce the lockdown and to prevent people from going out, it's actually been met in some cases with a lot of resistance, and there was some shooting that took place. So that's what I call the fault line that started to happen within societies itself. The numbers increasing, their infrastructure is barely coping, and that's why we need to send even knowledge and material to assist them. Definitely they are affected. And Jeffrey, I couldn't help but notice that Bob, in his question, he had a line that can we separate the politics from humanity? Well, I can assure everyone who's listening to us, in Project Rosanna, we separate the politics from humanity. It is a safe place. Now, that doesn't mean that we are ignorant of the politics. Doesn't mean that we are all the same. No, we have different views, different opinions. But the matrix that binds us together is our humanity. But at the same time, we would need to be wary of the politics because it will impact greatly on what we are doing. We need to be sensitive culturally, religiously, and politically. And we're not taking side. We only take side of those who needs, because the same way as when a patient comes to my surgery, I'll treat him regardless of his religion, background, level of knowledge, and that sort of thing. And the same way is actually we're applying almost the same principle in the board of Project Rosanna. We sometimes agree, sometimes we need to take a decision, but that is the value of democracy and exchange of opinion. Now, in the West Bank, we can't separate the politics from the humanity. But those in leadership position, those have the leadership and the vision, they sometimes separate the politics from humanity, and they are opening door. Those inside there, they can't separate the two together. We can't help them to separate it. And then we retreat. We knock on their door. If they're gonna keep it closed, keep it closed. There are too many other doors to knock. We're not gonna stop knocking. And we have seen a great partner in what we are doing with the Palestinian Authority through the Foreign Affairs Minister. We've seen a great partner with the Palestinian ambassadors in here. And we've seen great partners at the ground with non-government organization, that sort of thing. But at the same time, We have seen people who look at us in the same way as I was labeled, what's the word, normalizing the issues with the enemies and that sort of things. And, what we are doing here, we're helping a human being. We're not involving in the politics of things. We are aware of it. People will label us in any way they want, and they are free to do so, no problem, as long as they don't put our life at risk.
Yeah, thank you. And if any questions come in while I'm making these comments, great. But I just want to say that one of the things that each of you spoke about was your drive toward humanity, the notion that we need to get to know the other. And if we don't allow ourselves to be open enough to meet the other as the other, then we end up demonizing that person for being different from ourselves. And sadly, the situation, Jamal, you've reflected about what happened with the Lebanese civil war, where Muslims and Christians who were neighbors, who were friends, and lived in civil society together, suddenly became separated from a true fracture, and sadly, the impact of that still is reverberating in Lebanon today. And similarly, after the second Intifada, so nearly 20 years now, the same thing. You have a whole generation, practically, of Palestinians and Israelis who only know the other in a fear-based and demonized way. And so these relationships have been fractured for decades, and the fear and the hatred sadly is allowed to fester on that, and it's quite a scary time. And so the thing is, here comes this huge tragedy for all of humanity. And I think, Ron, you alluded to the fact that there are still unfortunately people out there who are denying or calling it a plandemic or whatever, and refusing to socially isolate or keep physical distance and things like that. But on the other hand, as you've also said, it's created opportunities even with physical distance for people to come together. And I think what's so inspiring about your work is that, as you said earlier, people from totally different backgrounds can learn to engage with each other and through each other, as here we do it as Australians, to make a significant difference on the ground, and to try to keep that faith as opposed to a fear-based perspective. Ron, you want to make?
Yeah, I want to just say something which is it's been a completely interesting, to me, an eye-opener. If COVID has done anything over the last 6 months, it has done something very profound and significant inside Israel. You may or may not know, and your audience may or may not know, but really over the last 15, 20 years, increasingly the backbone of the Israeli health system has been enhanced and enriched by the involvement of Israeli Arabs and Israeli Palestinians. COVID has, for the first time, really unveiled to all Israelis the incredible commitment, involvement, and engagement by Israel's Arab population in the health sector. There were some wonderful stories, including an amazing video that was circulated about all these health professionals who were working in the health sector, multiple shifts, putting their lives on the line to help the COVID patients in the hospitals. And then they removed their masks, their surgical masks, and they're Israeli Arabs. And you will hear it more. And so what's happened here is that health is empowering this sector of the community. Your group, IRAC in Israel, the Israel Reform Action
Center, yeah.
They did a fantastic book. They did a whole research on the role of the Israeli Arabs in the health sector, and its coming of age was in COVID. And what it means is there's a group inside Israel of Israelis who are increasingly proudly identifying themselves as Israelis. They're Israeli Palestinians, and they are going to be part of our bridge between Israel and the Palestinian sector in terms of building better understanding, because they're culturally sensitive, they speak the same language, but they live the reality on both sides, and they can speak about their relationship with the other, and it goes a long way mitigating people's perceptions. But you touched on a very important point, and it's a key driver for us. A whole generation has now grown up since the outbreak of the Second Intifada, and narratives have become more extreme. And if we don't deal with those narratives and change them or moderate them so that they go back from their extremism on both sides, there is not going to be a chance for engagement. But by working at the people-to-people level, we genuinely believe we can do that. And health is really the space to do it in, on scale, because you need to do things like this on scale. So we remain optimistic, Jeffrey. Jamal and I are really, brothers in arms on this. And we feel that both here in Australia, we have the privilege and the opportunity to engage with the broad community. And we can, by empowering people on the ground in Israel and Palestine, we can assist them to make a difference. And so giving us the opportunity to talk about it this evening is really much appreciated. And if you and your audience can take the word of Project Rosanna to their circles, and we definitely want to get outside our respective communal bubbles. But I would assure everybody's on this call, one of the really great joys of my last 7 years has been the opportunity to get out of the Caulfield Jewish bubble, begin to engage in a way that I wasn't given a chance to do for many, many years. And my eyes have been opened, my heart has been opened, and I think that as a result, I feel truly enriched by the experience.
Thank you so much. And I know you're physically in that bubble, but thank God technology can allow you to expand far beyond it over these next 6 weeks. Jamal, do you want to have any closing remarks for our friends listening in tonight?
Jeffrey, in hand-in-hand dinner that we had last year, we saw huge numbers of Australians coming together, sharing a meal from different religious and racial background. I saw your side of the community, and I saw my side of the community. And I was very heartened by the fact that they came in together. And I also very heartened by my side of the community. I keep them informed of what we are doing in Project Rosanna. And I see their reaction, their support. I go on the Voice of Islam radio stations almost every couple of weeks, keep them informed what Ron and we are doing. Because, and when we started to generate some money, we had a lot of people donating money. And there are people who wanted just to be on the safe side. They're donating anonymous, not putting their name, because they still know that they may have a backlash from other sides of the community. It's okay. We show them a leadership. We show them the light. We'll do, actually, we pave a way for them, and they will follow through. Right? Just need patience, and it needs commitment, and it needs vision, and it needs work. We're not just saying we are working. Let people do the talking. Let us do the working. Yeah. And thank you for that. Thank you for a lovely night.
Thank you for a lovely night. Just a quick word from our sponsors. Emanuel Synagogue does love to get engaged in conversations that broaden people's way of thinking and acting. But we also do have some fun cultural things as well. And for those of you who have, the ability, that we have a platform called Dinera. Dunerea. And just in a few minutes at 6:30, there's going to be a great program organized by Ilan Cadron with music and dancing from around the world called Synchronicity. And through Dinero, if you look it up, you'll see all kinds of other cultural activities in particular coming, including a virtual voices with Plus 61J, getting people around to sing together. From Emanuel Synagogue, in addition to this kind of conversation, we do have other health conversations. 2 weeks from today at 10:30 in the morning on the 16th of August, Rabbi Nino will be in conversation with Dr. Ginny Mansberg. M is for menopause. So, and you know, men, that you can hear the word men in there, you know, it's not just for women, that conversation. I want to thank behind the scenes, head of marketing communications, Rob Klein, for organizing the platforms tonight, Marina Caponio, director of programming, for organizing this and just about every other virtual program we are doing right now. And especially to you, Ron Finkel, AM, Dr. Jamal Rifi, AM, your incredible humanitarian approach to life, your ability to be so open-minded, to so open-hearted, to learn from life's experiences, that no matter what bubble or structure we might come from, ultimately, we all are human beings, and it's only working this one earth together that we can create the kind of health and peace that we need, whether that be here or Israel, Palestine, where we have so many deep connections as well. So thank you so much for your generosity of spirit and for your, actually, as you say, doing the work on the ground. May we be inspired to follow in your footsteps. Have a beautiful evening, everyone. Stay safe and well.
Thank you.
Shabbat Tov.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jamal, as always.
Indeed.
Thank you,
Indeed.
Ron. Thank you,
Jamal,
Jeffrey.
Ron. Thank you. There's Marina. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.